Delphi. So I think I think what we want is Pascal.
Delphi works for me. Yeah, just try it again.
What's your URL look like, Scott?
Grep.app.
But then after that,
No, I just go grep.app and then there's a search bar.
oh, okay. Well,
I'm not
okay.
so just grep.app homepage.
So yeah. So whichever way you manage to get it, oh, you can also filter these repositories. So if we filter this, like there are obviously ones with Delphi in the name, so we can do this over here. So now we've got like, I don't know if it means we've only got these numbers, these ones. I'll exit and get back to where we were before. No, it seems. I feel like this is not the whole list of what it's grabbing onto, but it's not really telling us that there are more. But anyway, I figured people might be interested. I was searching for like, well, I was interested to find that somehow I came across T-virtual. Oops, T-virtual interface. Something broke in the lounge room. Which after again, I'm not, I'm total beginner with interfaces. So researching this thing, it seems like someone can hand you an interface or you have an interface definition, which of course you need a concrete class to implement the interface. And it seems like you can just sort of conjure one up from nothing. Maybe. I don't know. Don't ask me. I'm not the expert. Um, but anyway, you can grep GitHub. Um, so now we need to find Vincent. Oh, sorry. Um, everybody else, please feel free to speak. Like, tell me to shut up at every opportunity possible, right?
Shut up.
Um,
Remember interfaces.
I was saying before that um, Dr. Kev and Professor Ian are here from oh, Lex. Lex is here, but may not have a microphone.
Hello, Lex.
Heidi Hody, everybody, and Paul from Victoria, um, who maybe we know from the forum, but in any
Yeah, who's
case,
that, Paul? Introduce yourself, Paul. Nope, can't hear you. Got your mic muted. Oh, carry on.
yeah. No pressure, but if you want to say good day at some stage, go ahead. Um,
Oh, and
I was
Ian,
just,
Ian Hamilton. Can we say hello to Ian?
yeah. Ian's here from the UK, as is Dr. Kev at the moment. We haven't fully
Right.
imported him yet. So between Kevin and Scott V and uh, Peter coming along later, and Jeff, and maybe Rowett and Ian. I don't think you really need to hear from me necessarily today on my lame interpretation of interfaces, but we'll see how it happens. But yeah, sorry. I was saying, if any of you guys want to like launch into this subject, feel free at any time. We're way less structured than our very organized UK co-conspirators. Ian, I was amused for you to see on the Slack channel for you to say, if you get enough votes. You voted for yourself. That is already enough votes here. And I'll vote for you too. So where did I put?
Yeah, Paul, could I just make a comment? Is that okay?
Please.
I introduced interfaces into a syllabus I was responsible for back in first teaching 2017. And I wrote, I wrote a couple of books that support that syllabus. And that included a chapter, 2 chapters on interface and based on loose coupling, because loose coupling has run through our syllabus for a very long time. Back in the days of structured programming, that was between procedures, basically making them as little connected as possible, except through the procedure interface. And then, of course, when you transition to object-oriented programming, the equivalent is the interface mechanism. So there was a mantra. I picked it up in an ACM article. Can't remember. It was quite a long time ago. That you should program to interfaces and not to implementations, because implementations obviously change. So, for example, if you had a very simple elementary example, which is the one I quoted in the book, because teaching 16 to 18-year-olds, was a sort of simple sorting method, and then you could have a for loop, or correction, a summing method, not a sorting method. Sorting method would be a little bit more advanced. So sum to n integers, the first n integers, you could use a for loop, or you could use Gauss's algorithm. So you could have the same interface, and you could define a method there called sum to n, but you have a choice of how you implement it. And when it gets a little bit more advantageous when you look at if you had to implement a method in, let's say, 20, 30 or different ways, because you're catering for different circumstances. If you try to do it through inheritance, you'd have a lot of reproduction of code. If you do it through interfaces, you minimize the amount of code replication. So that's why this article was encouraging this. And I haven't watched Scott's the recording of Scott's talk, but the key is loose coupling, and it's the equivalent in structured programming of making sure that procedures are self-contained, and so that they're highly cohesive, I think is the term, and loosely coupled. So you only see what you pass in and out through the procedure interface, either its parameters, in-out parameters, and so on. And the examples I used in the A-level computer science book I replicated in the Delphi book. So I have an example which is based on an interface called iDiet, and in order to actually concretize this, you need then to create a class which has to inherit 2 things: T-interfaced object, which basically provides all the mechanism under the hood for dealing with the interface and making it concrete, and the class that you want to implement. So you would define a specific class as like in Java per unit. Let's say you had a meat eater, a vegetarian eater, a vegan eater, or whatever. Each would be a separate class in its own separate unit. And you would use that as the second inheritance in the interface, basically. And so you would then have implemented the, what do they eat method, whatever it is, in the interface. So I had to keep it as simple as possible, because it's just a like a little bite that a 16, 17-year-old could get their head around to understand. So I had to think long and hard about how to make it so. I can remember years ago going to a conference in London. This was when the conference hall was packed with Delphi programmers who wanted to understand a bit more about interfaces. And I'm just desperately trying to think of my memory these days isn't great. The guy who I think he was an English graduate who made his career out of Delphi programming and writing books and delivering conferences. And I'll think of his name in a minute, probably.
Was it Nick?
He wrote the
Nick Hodges?
sorry,
Nick
Scott.
Hodges?
No, Scott.
Nick,
No, oh God, no, sorry, my brain is going reverse.
there's a Chris Rolliston huge books that
No, this
around.
this guy wrote a couple of books on the API for interfacing with loads of different databases in Delphi, modern Delphi. Anyway, cut a long story short, everything he said went over my head. I still have it because it was highly technically and abstract in terms of concentrating on the interfaced object, which was necessary because, but I don't think you need to go down to that of detail. So anyway, so yeah, it's I'll tell you which page.
I didn't use it before.
Sorry,
It's good.
very handy at times.
The time, yeah.
So it's round about page 400, 405 or whatever in the Delphi book, and then I have a Unit 1 AQA A-level computer science book, where I started it, but it was just reading an article in ACM, which was basically programmed to interfaces and favor composition over inheritance, and essentially that composition is used in your definition of the abstract methods, and you can only in Delphi you can only define properties in an interface. You can't define variables or fields, and the properties must have proper getter and setters, and you're not allowed to name the field that is named in the implementing class. So if you like, it's like a pure abstract class where there's no implementation, except any class is abstract if it has one abstract method in it, but it could have concrete methods as well. But this is the difference. You can't have anything other than abstract methods and properties which are abstract in that the getter and setters are not defined, and the alias field is can't be assigned memory or anything like that because there is no memory allocation. So
I've got those pages on the screen at the moment, Kevin.
yeah. So if you go, program to interfaces, not implementation. Coupling measures the strength of relationships between modules. So loose coupling and structure programming is achieved when a subroutine's parameter list is its data interface with other subroutines in the main program. Loose coupling and object-oriented programming is achieved when an object interface with other is via methods and properties whose identifiers but not implementation are made public. So that's the key, and that's what I try to teach my students. Composition is, competition is what Delphi uses for its forms. You put anything on a form, you expect with competition all the children are cleared up, all the space they occupy are taken care of when you close the form, and that's because the form is composed of components on the form. There's a looser form of composition is a form of aggregation, but there's two forms of ownership. One where the ownership of something is outside of this object in another object, etc., which is a bit more complicated. But so students are examined on understanding this, so they need to understand to this level. So yeah.
Hey, Kevin, it's John here, and I've had a great look at your section on interfaces, and but I was a bit disappointed not to find it as a headline topic, because I think you could have multiplied what you have given us, multiply that by a factor of about 4, and but like what you did give us is, look, that really gave me an insight as to what it's all about, which I've never really had before from anyone else. So I think
Hi, John. Yeah, so when you emailed me, I'd not connected you with our conversations we've had before. But basically the target audience was 16 to 18-year-olds, and it's bite-sized chunks that a student in an hour-long lesson can take away and work with, and that's where I write the books. But in 1,200 pages, I had to leave something out. But
Well, I've got an idea for that one too. There's a few other things I would have liked to have seen.
yes,
So I would suggest to put it all together and make it in 2 volumes. And the volume 1 would be the simpler stuff for the the lesser competent, lesser need sort of guy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
The second book would be more complicated stuff, e.g. e.g. interfaces, which a lot of people would not need to use, but then it's vital stuff for those that are got bigger projects in mind, and so I've now seen that my own project needs a few interfaces, and that's all thanks to you.
Thanks. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, the other bit, the thing I was writing on behalf of you, it's sort of pretty much complete in my mind, and you'll have it in a few days.
Excellent, brilliant. That's absolutely. You're absolutely right. That book was only going to be about 600 pages long, and I just couldn't. It's all that I've taught over the years, distilled into 1,200 pages. And the only reason why I stopped at 1,200 pages is because the printer couldn't handle a print copy longer than 1,200. But it was too late to divide it up. And the thing at the back of my mind, there are some very good introduction to Pascal books around, an introduction to Delphi books. And I was more interested in the second half of the book, things which are not written about. I have an ex-teaching colleague who ended up running a very successful publishing company, and she would write very superficial stuff, just enough to get people started, and she sold huge numbers of books because lots of students, if they're not terribly hardworking and they want something about a month before the exam, just to cram to get a pass. And so for instance, Mark, sorry, I'm going off at a tangent. Mark has written a very good book on Pascal, so concise and very explanatory, and I don't think I can compete with Mark, but
I think you can, sir. I think the layout and the way you do things is quite superior to Marco.
Really? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, look, you've got colours and blocks and arrows and examples, and you explain it step by step by step by step by step, and I didn't really see that as much in your section that you did give us on interfaces and what I've just recently looked at. I think you could expand it out and you could double the complexity, and I say you could end up with 3 or 4 times as much as what you've given us right now.
Yeah.
And maybe you do need to take my second little suggestions there, and have 2 copies. Book 1 and book 2, and everybody just picking it up. They'll want book 1, and the ones that are more advanced will want both of them.
Yeah. That's a really good thought. I'm running out of time. I'm getting old though.
Oh well,
I've had to stop working over this last week because I've gone and given myself a detached retina. So in the morning at the opticians, lunchtime appointment at the hospital, 3 hours later in the operating theatre, because I've so at the moment I can't see out of my right eye. I've got a gas, but they pump the eyeball back up again, like pumping up an inner tube in a bike to press the retina back.
Yikes. I know a girl that's got exactly the same problem as you.
Really? And it's age related, possibly. Too much too much working on weights in the gym. But anyway, but I was working on Cortex Pascal yesterday. So
I want you to stop this one-eyed attitude, Kevin.
Yeah, it's a bit one-tracked.
It's unacceptable. All right, so we're going to try. Sorry, if anyone else wanted to speak, please do so. I forgot to change my screen resolution down from 4K. We'll do that if we need to. I'm going to try playing a video and we will see if it works out or not. In the past, Scott rescued us, Scott V, by playing it for us. Well, let's just try starting to play, and we'll figure out if bandwidth is going to behave.
Did you
and then
click
we'll
the
figure out.
Did you click the optimize for video and support sound or something when you shared your screen?
You make a good point. Zoom, yes. Zoom.
Just to
Often
If everyone watching, with Zoom, you can zoom in. So if you're at home, yeah, mouse wheel or control mouse wheel, something like that. You got a macro key now, like you can control drag across.
Share sound mono.
So that's the people watching, rather not the presenters.
Yeah, I meant to mention. I heard you say that somewhere else. Maybe in that November meeting, Scott, and I didn't know that, and I meant to say thanks for sharing it.
But you know, it's never that simple at the moment when you're dealing with third-party packages. So anyway, I'll leave the rest until next week.
It's starting to play at the moment. If people could shout out if it's horrible for them.
Oh, it's a few weeks off.
Oh yeah, sorry, not next week. In a few weeks' time. And I'll close that one. Close that. Okay, so just finally, where are we? Where's my demo gone? ADUG demo.
How's it going so far?
Been a bit blurry.
Yeah,
For me.
I'll drop my screen resolution, but we also have
Was
the
it-
code. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, was it blurry on your screen?
Oh, did I? Okay, no, that's it. I mean, it does kind of look a little.
Hey guys, if you double click on the like on Paul's screen that he's sharing, it should take it to full screen.
I think even the original's a bit, bit fuzzy. But what I was going to say is we also have the the actual code that he uploaded to GitHub. Is this a lot clearer, hopefully?
Yeah.
Is this clear for everybody?
Okay for me.
Or everybody who cares? That's good. Well, this screen's still on 4K, so it's good that
Yeah, I think of the depths automatically. I think.
we can zoom in a bit further anyway, if necessary. All right. So I'll keep playing the video, but if anyone's dissatisfied with it, like, don't be quiet, shout out. And I will maximize full screen HD 1440.
HD 1440. What's that?
1440p.
Not bad, that one.
You guys, have any more questions about the SVG stuff or anything?
Not at the moment.
No. Okay. Well, this was just something that we mentioned a few weeks ago or a few months ago about using interfaces on forms and frames and things like that, which I thought would be useful to cover. So a lot of people kind of have this misconception about interfaces is that they're for working with COM objects only. And I use interfaces everywhere. If you look at my code, there will be barely a form or a unit anywhere where there's an interface used. And it's not, obviously it's not without some hassles, but you soon learn your way around what reference counting is and so on. So this is just I'll just run the app quickly. It's a very simple demo app. So just with a couple of windows.
I'd just like to say it's kind of fuzzy, even for me, to look at the moment. So, but I think most of the content will be in the spoken part, and if we need to look at the code, we'll stop and look at the code.
A couple of controls and what have you. So what I'm doing here is, in this example, I think I mentioned this last time, a typical example, and one of the reasons I use interfaces on forms and frames is that if you look at the
John made a good point. I'll put the link. So this was a meeting. This is like the 52-minute part mark of the meeting. Copy, and I'll put that link in the chat. I haven't been checking chat. Am I behind? Oh, thanks, Scott, for putting Ian's video in there. This is it was a Canberra ADUG meeting, and it was in October 2020. And Vincent Parrott is talking.
Interface section in this particular T-main window here. All of this stuff is public. So if I reference this form anywhere else in my code, whoever's working on that code can access all of that stuff, even though they probably don't need to, and they just wanted to, add something to the a memo, for example, or check if a button's enabled or disabled or something. It's kind of the whole thing about interfaces is an abstraction, but it's also about hiding stuff you don't need to see. So for example, in this case here, I've got this log view here that I want to, different parts of the application to write log messages to. So, normally if you're just using forms, what you do is you pass around a reference to the form everywhere, and they call main form memo1.lines.add. But then, 3 months later, I decided actually there's this new control here that I want to use instead of a tmemo. And then I've got to go around everywhere in my application where I've been writing, main form.memo1.lines.add or log memo or whatever it's called. I've got to replace that with whatever the new interface is on that control. So, basically, it's a mistake that Delphi made in its language design to make everything that's on a form public, basically. This is a private implementation detail, and it shouldn't really be exposed to the rest of the code. So in this example, what I did was, so I've got this frame that actually implements my iLogger interface. So this iLogger is just a single method to log a value, with a particular log level. And so my log frame, it's adding lines to a memo just like you would anywhere else. But
does anyone need to see this in more detail? I will also put the GitHub link in the chat.
Could you
as well.
just increase the font in the IDE? That would be helpful.
Well, we're watching a video.
Oh, in that case, yeah. Okay.
I tried making his screen section take up as much of my screen as possible.
Right.
Do you think it would be better?
I'm going to use the old Windows magnifier tool.
But we do have the code from GitHub, so we could just look at the the actual code if necessary.
It's an implementation detail that the rest of the application doesn't need to know. So on my main form here, if I look at where flogger is set, so I'm basically saying that my log frame, I'm casting that as my iLogger because the log frame actually implements iLogger there. So you can, so a lot of people think as well with interfaces that, you know, oh, so if I add that to my frame or my form, then I'm using reference counting on the frame or the form. Well, you're not, because if you trace back up from T frame, T custom frame, keep going, T win control, T component, and if we look for add ref, T component add ref here, it's basically returning -1, which basically tells the compiler that, or tells the VCL or the RTL that reference counting is not happening. It still makes those.
That audio was the video, not me.
Calls, which is a bit annoying, but still. So if we go back to my log frame, so my T frame implements iLogger, and here on my main form here, I've placed that frame on this tab here. So there's the log frame 1 on that tab sheet. And so I've just got a reference to the interface here, and then I'm passing that interface in wherever I need to. So to another frame on the form, also to, when I show that.
If we need to stop anywhere, like if anyone's thinking like, whoa, what did you just say? Again, shout out, we can stop, and like that's the whole point, is to stop and look at in more detail if we need to.
Other form, I'm passing in the logger to the constructor of the other form. So my second form wants to log to that memo, but it doesn't actually know about the form, the main form. It just knows about the iLogger. And so when I click a button on this form here, you know, that's just calling flogger. It's not calling tmain form memo 1 lines, you know, and exposing that implementation detail of the actual log. So just to show that it actually works, so there's my, on the main form, calling the iLogger debug. And then I can show another form here and go and log an error back to there. But I've just called flogger error. That's all I've, you know. We go back to that second form. So there's the call to the logger. So, you know, so I've passed around a reference to my frame everywhere around my application, but it doesn't know that it's a frame or how it's implemented. It just knows that it has one method, log.
And I'm just going to interrupt here, that I'm sure a bunch of you that are settled and, you know, maybe use the same sort of structure or similar in your applications already, maybe just like, yep, listening to this. This is going very quickly to me. Anyway, I would want to like come at this way more slowly. I've been listening to this while driving, and it, you know, basically listening to the spoken communication, but I hadn't realized how fast he was zipping around in the code base, and because he's obviously very familiar with it. But anyway, that's just my perspective.
That's all it is. So it frees me up now, so I can come in here and say, well, actually, in my log frame, where's my log frame? I say, well, actually, let's swap out that memo and make it a list box instead. You know, and the only place I have to make the change is here. Yeah, okay, so change that to list box 1 lines add, or whatever the code implementation is for that particular control. Now, or it could be a fancy custom control that does color logging and all sorts of, you know, other stuff. But the main part is that the rest of the application doesn't have to change. So that's basically just hiding stuff from me, hiding all the implementation details of the form. And so I do that in Funnability. Pretty much every frame, every form will be implement some interface or another if I need to reference it elsewhere in the application. And I do the same with things like, so if we look at actions. Oh, actually, look at the Delphi one because it's got locks. So each one of these tabs here on,
Again, yeah, the video's still fuzzy for me. I assume filtered by Zoom, also kind of fuzzy for you guys. And while I like this color scheme, it might not be the best for a broadcast Zoom meeting. Are you guys having trouble like seeing?
I find it's okay to watch. I mean, there's not a huge amount of code.
Yeah. Yeah, it's okay. I got the essentials. Yes, encapsulation. Yeah, through interfaces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul,
very
have you posted the link to that video? Is that your last thing you posted?
The last thing I posted is the GitHub to the code, and the second last is the video,
Right.
which should start at the correct time point, which is 52 minutes in.
Nope.
there's actually a
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
frame, and these frames all implement a standard interface, iProperty page, and the rest. And this particular dialogue, the host dialogue, it doesn't know that it's working with frames other than when it instantiates them, but it talks to them through the interface. It doesn't know about any of the controls on here, and these frames don't know anything about the form that they're on either. They just know that they're on an iProperty page host or something like that. So it's a good way of abstracting things. So this particular log here, again, implements a bunch of interfaces. This view here implements a bunch of interfaces. Same here, same here. They're all just. And so whenever, say for example, in here when I want to add an action, I click on there. It's not referring to the action list or the target as a T frame, virtual list view, add item, whatever. It's talking to an interface to do that. So I could swap out this virtual list view, virtual tree view for something else if I wanted to, but it wouldn't mess up the rest of the application. So another thing that I did with interfaces on this form here is, we're main form. I've got these clipboard buttons on here, it's clipboard actions. So look at our action editor here. So I've got edit, cut, copy, paste actions, and I want to have these buttons enable and disable and operate on different parts of the application depending on where the focus is. So this is kind of an abstracted thing that I've pulled out of Findability that I've implemented for lots of things. So I've got this clipboard controller class, which implements iClipboard controller, which just allows you to set or unset the clipboard provider. And a clipboard provider just has some basic, can I cut, can I paste, can I copy, and then the actual cut, copy and paste implementation. So I've implemented that clipboard provider on the log view. Can copy, yes, if the memo's actually got some selected text. Can cut, no, because the log view is read only. So can paste, and then copy is just log memo, copy to clipboard. Cut and paste don't do anything. And then on the main form as well, I've implemented clipboard provider on the main window as well. So if we look here, it's looking at, sorry, that's actually for the actions. I'll come back to that. On the second form, I've implemented, no, sorry, not on there. Where have I done it? All right, this is a few weeks ago. I haven't really looked at it since then. Main form. this memo frame. So it's just another frame. It's also on the main form as well, where I've actually allowed full clipboard facilities for this. And so what this does is when the memo gets focused here, it actually calls into the clipboard controller and says, set the provider as me. So that means that those actions now are talking to me to know whether they're enabled or disabled. And if you click on cut, copy or paste, it comes to me. When I lose the focus, it actually removes me as the provider. So, and then the same with the log frame, when it, I actually didn't implement that on there. Why didn't I do that? Set provider. So when the main form gets activated, by default, it's setting itself to be the clipboard provider. So anyway, if we run that now, so I've got debug, log and error. Right. So if we look there now, see our toolbar icons are completely disabled. If I select some text, then copy becomes enabled, but paste and so on don't. Go into this memo here and you see that paste is actually enabled. There must be something in the clipboard. And if I select and cut, paste is enabled, copy, paste, and paste is enabled. Oh, I didn't actually implement it on here. I could have implemented this. So this was also the clipboard enabled as well. So basically, what all it's doing is actually is allowing you to direct actions to a particular part of your user interface just through some simple interfaces. I've seen a lot of applications where the clipboard only works if you're in a particular area of your application. If I look at Funnel Builder, for example, why did I close that? So this is where I implemented this particular idea. Oops. Oh, sorry, it is running. Too many copies of things running. So, cut, copy and paste here is different to cut, copy and paste. So if I want to copy the target, for example, and paste the target, it's different to copy the action. Oops, oh, well, that's interesting. Edit, copy, edit, paste. So there's different things that you might want to cut and copy, and different objects you might want to support the clipboard on in your application. So this is a way of having these controls here. There's these clipboard buttons and so on, edit control. Just directing them to something that knows how to manage cut, copy, paste on them. And it's all done just through some simple interfaces. So basically these two interfaces here. And then one object to actually implement the clipboard controller itself. So not a lot of code to give you, quite a lot of flexibility elsewhere in your code, and all done through simple interfaces instead of going, well, if the focus is on memo 1, then enable clipboard through if the memo 1 has, it's a lot of abstraction over a bunch of really complicated logic otherwise. So, any questions?
Appropriate also for us to ask any questions or observations. Has anybody done similar in their applications?
No, I haven't, but it makes the point about reducing code replication. So, which is a key feature that I thought about, the reason for using interfaces.
Yeah,
Right,
I
let's
used
code.
interfaces in the project where we had 6 programmers, so it made sense there. But my biggest gripe was that when I was debugging and I'm single stepping, it hits the interface and then stops. And then you have to figure out which unit it is that where the code is. And then you have to start debugging from there.
So the interface is being what do you call instantiated by
Yeah, but it
some
doesn't know.
class
That unit doesn't
somewhere.
know, you see.
Scott or Peter, do you have any like hints or feedback on that?
No, it's a pain in the butt. You try to navigate around, and as soon as you hit something that's an interface, well, now you've got to know the code intimately to actually get to the classes that implement it. One thing that I'd really like Delphi to implement is something where when you get to the interface, you can actually right click and choose which implementation you want to go to from there. That'd be nice.
Is there any carried around information in the, I guess, interface reference? Is it that you're encountering that? Because I seem to remember, like, I think it's kind of breaking the principles, but you can now create a object or find the object from an interface. I seem to remember people talking about it.
You can do code to get the, okay, so you can get code that will find out if a particular class implements an interface, and you can also get code that can work backwards from an interface to get to, or you can cast it back to the class. But as far as when you're in the middle of the code and you're designing it, you don't have any way of navigating. So you get to the interface, and then it's sort of like, okay, well, here's my interface. I'm just going to search through all of the units in my code, looking for this interface inside some sort of constructor declaration, because that's the only way you can really tell. Now, realistically, if we've got this partial code compiler sort of thing that helps us out during design time, it should be able to go through and find out all of the classes that implement this particular interface, so that we've got some sort of method of going from the interface to any one of the classes that implement it that are referenced in your project. But they haven't done that yet.
Like a short list?
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, it works really well in runtime, because there's a lot of instrumentation to get you different places. But while you're actually designing the thing, nah.
Right. I was thinking of debugging step by step. So that's a little easier, is it? To get to realize what. Sorry, go ahead.
If there's an implementation, if there's like a function or something, and most of the time when you're dealing with interface descendants, you've got properties which have a function behind them, or you've just got functions and procedures. So you can, if you put a breakpoint in the in the class behind that interface, as you step in, you'll hit that breakpoint. But what if you've got a dozen classes that implement it? You've got to breakpoint every single one of them and just find out which one actually gets hit.
At runtime? Oh yeah,
at runtime.
Yeah, at runtime, obviously. So that there's no sort of like information buried in there to say at this particular point in time, this interface is being implemented through X particular class, you're saying?
There is a way of getting back that way, but it's rather awkward. It's much easier to go the other way, because you
Right.
can, using the supports function, you can ask, you can have a class, or rather an object, and you can put an object in there, ask it if it supports a particular interface, and it'll even spit out the interface for you. Or you
Right.
can give it an interface and ask if this interface or the class behind that interface also supports this other interface, and that'll work as well. So there's lots of ways of getting the interface. The only way to get a class back is you've got to try and, or you cast it back to your ultimate descendant, and then find out if that class is the class that you're looking for. It's a lot more awkward trying to get back to the class. It's doable, but you've got to, again, know that that your descendant class is something like, oh no, I guess you could go back to T object and it'll still work. But T interfaced object, trouble is with T interfaced object is that it's not the only candidate for the base class for an interfaced object. It's just the one that does the garbage collection. There's like 4 or 5 of them out there.
Right.
And if you choose one of the other classes to descend from, then of course you can't cast back to T interface object, because it may not be a descendant. But everything descends from T object. So if you can get back to I interface, and from I interface to a T object, then you can ask the T object what class it is and work from there.
So, Scott, is there any way to interrogate the runtime type system in the way you can when you're doing functional programming?
RTTY is even worse, because what it's doing is it's actually looking at the structure itself, and the structure is just going to be the interface. So the only way you can do it is by going from your, say, I widget back to an I interface. I interface you cast into a T object, and then the T object you to get the class name, and you can go from there.
Oh, I got it.
Does that involve
much easier? Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, you go ahead, Scott.
Yeah. By the difficulty that it is in order to get back to the original class, you've got to, you have a feeling that it was never designed to do that. What the system is expecting, or what Delphi is expecting, is that once you're in the interface space, you stay in the interface space. And you can get from one interface to another interface of the same object just by asking supports, and that'll work. Because what supports does is it buries its way into the object and finds out what it is in order to determine. And look, if you drill into that code, you can find a way of getting back to the class, but you can see that it wasn't designed to do it that way. The supports doesn't throw back a class to you, it always throws an interface. One other thing I need to say is that if you're using T interface object, you need to make sure that your very first assignment on construction is to an interface object, or to an interface. If you have a class instead, your reference count's going to be out by 1, and it'll free itself the first time you go into an interface and then back out, because as you create it, it's got 0 reference counts. As soon as you assign it to an interface, it's got 1. So if you create a class, pass it into a procedure that takes an interface, as soon as you return from that procedure, going into the procedure, it increments, and now you've got a count of 1. And when you pop back out, you go to a count of 0. Or for a T interface object, when you get to a count of 0, you're freeing yourself. So always make sure when you're using a T interface object descendant that the very first thing you do is assign it to an interface, not a class. Oh, sorry, not to an object holder.
So that's a function that's taking an argument of type interface.
Okay, so
Base
you'll
object.
have the way you get to an interface is you have a class which creates an object.
Yep.
That object is assigned to something.
Right.
If that
Right.
something
Gotcha,
is,
gotcha.
if that something that variable that contains it is an interface, you've immediately got a reference count of 1, and it's going to stay there until the reference count gets back to 0. If you assign it to an object type or a T object descendant, then your reference count remains at 0. And then as soon as you assign it to an interface, and then that interface that you've assigned it to goes out of scope, it frees itself because it's down to a count of 0. So you've got to make sure that you're always saving to, or there should always be a variable of, well, that is an I interface descendant somewhere.
Right. So you're saying if we've got a couple of variables, we can just use I interface, right? We've got interface of type what? I interface.
Yep.
You'd be much better at typing this than me. And some object. Can we do this easy, or do we have to define? We have to define a class that supports a type.
Well, if you don't want syntax errors, we can pretend.
A type T object equals class.
Open bracket T interface object.
Right. And I interface.
Yep.
Or maybe spell it right, even.
Capital Y at the front.
And just
Yep.
that much. And then we'd have a variable called object, which implements T object.
T object.
And
yeah.
So down here, it's like you're saying X, because this was one of the things, one of my.
Okay, so do this. Obj becomes equal to T object dot create.
Yep.
And on the next line, inf becomes equal to T object dot create. Right. So the difference between obj and inf is the reference count. Obj has a reference count of 0. Inf has a reference count of 1, which means that if you pass it into some procedure that takes an interface as a parameter, the reference count for each of them will go up by 1. And then when it returns that, so yeah. So if you just put in there, and then it's I interface as the type. You'll need to make that a procedure then.
Oh, right, yes. Oh, well, okay. Will it still work with procedure?
Yes. The point is the reference counting. See, and now if you do obj, if you pass inf into procedure X, then what happens is the reference count goes, you don't even need anything in there.
Yep.
So if you do X open bracket inf close bracket.
Oops. And how can we check it still
and
exists?
then X open bracket obj close bracket. And then if you do the next two lines of code will be if assigned.
Right. Oh. Yep. Inf and both of them?
Oh, and then obj test for inf and test to obj. And
Yep.
what you'll find is that by the time you get to that assignment, inf will still exist and obj won't. And the reason for that is that with a reference count of 1 for the inf, as it goes into the procedure, it gets the reference count incremented by 1. So it's now got 2 inside the procedure. When it leaves the procedure, it drops back down to 1, all good. But when the obj starts at 0, goes into the procedure, it goes to 1. And then when it comes out, drops down to 0. Dropping down to 0 is the trigger for freeing. So it frees the object.
Is it because we use a procedure?
No. Okay.
Can we access the ref count?
Should because they're I interface, yes, you definitely can.
You'll have to help me.
Yep, right line. And
I
then
dot.
it's I dot. Right. Okay, so you're going to have to cast this as the T interface object in order to get the ref count, which is going to be interesting. So T interface object, open bracket, I, close bracket, dot, ref count. I think it's ref count.
I think you had rep count just now anyway, wasn't it? Just I dot underscore rep count.
The function that
I think it was I underscore rep count, but the thing is that's an integer rather than a string. Oh, because it's expecting a string. So if you put int to string, and then you put I dot inside the int to string.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, what are we doing?
So replace the right line brackets int to string.
Okay.
So delete that inside there, int to string instead.
Well, I'd rather use dot to string, but
actually it doesn't matter because right line doesn't care whether it's an integer or a string or anything.
I was thinking about if it's
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying, right? Because of the right line.
Oh, because they're right line. So because okay.
I'll just say parenthetically that this bit here, where like I could understand declaring. So we declare in. Should this be IObj?
No.
Okay, so that's the T interface object.
Anyway.
So it's just ref count.
Yeah, that's type T.
Sorry, Scott, what was that?
Yeah, the dot is okay. So T interface. Oh, you're missing the D in interface object.
No, that's a different type completely. Sorry.
Right, dot ref
better?
count.
Is it better?
Yep, ref count is the word you're looking for.
And that's what Peter was saying about the integer. Gotcha.
Yep. So what we're doing is we're forcing the cast back to from I to interface object. Now that might spit at you. That might spit at you, so we might need to do a couple more dances. I can't remember.
All right, we'll see what happens. All right, got 2 and 1.
Yep. Okay, so if you were to reference anything from obj, even though it says good, it's probably going to access violate on you, which is sort of interesting because
yes, good point.
Oh, that's right. It's not because obj is an object. It's not freeing itself.
So if we if we put in
so if you just make a reference to obj is before the read line, it's going to spit at you. So put a try except in there. and obj.ref count.
Like the right.
No, just
Just in here?
obj.ref count.
Okay.
My memory is playing up a little bit, but I thought it was interfaced object, not interface object. Or am I getting confused?
Correct. No, you are right. It's interfaced object with a D.
I had it wrong before. Maybe your screen is not up to date.
Right. So you can right line that, and then in
Casting.
the except,
Shouldn't the casting also be interfaced object? Or
correct.
yeah.
Do we need to
Right.
cast
In
this
the
one?
except, put right line, and then open bracket and just put the words object already freed.
Try that.
What?
We got a ref count 0.
Got a ref count 0, but it didn't free.
The memory hasn't been corrupted yet, so it happens to work by sheer good or bad luck. But what Scott's saying is absolutely correct. So you can't expect it to work. It's just that memory might not be corrupted yet.
But shouldn't the compiler stop us calling?
No.
Well, it's not nil,
No.
is it? You're saying object is not nil at this stage?
So yeah, if you
if like
so for example, if
that won't work.
Held a string,
Assigned text checks the same thing, except assigned is a little bit better.
Right.
Yeah.
Assigned you can actually do onto a interface as well.
Right. Okay.
Oh, I wonder if you were to pass it into that same procedure a second time, whether or not that would die.
Right.
So if you do xobj inside the try.
Oops. And x. Oh.
Yeah, that's
happy with that.
Yeah, that. I'm wondering. Okay, just continue.
Oh, sorry. That was my fault.
Just continue.
Restep. So yeah, this must have been where the indignation took place.
Yeah, because now we're actually in the procedure. It's going, wow, I'm really not there anymore. So up until that point, as Peter said, we were running on fumes. It was the ghost of object past.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
This technique, by the way, is actually quite handy when you say the interface equals t-object create. And what if you're passing it into, you're calling it as a parameter to other places, and you don't know if they will continue keeping it or using it. All you know is that when you get to the end, you won't. So if they're not using it, at the end of this method, you want to free it up. If they are using it, then you don't want to free it up. But you can't know that here. But if you pass it on to an interface, and because of the ref counts, it's all sorted. When the ref count goes down to 0 and no one else is using it, then it will automatically free. So it's a handy way of handling life cycle.
Yeah. The only thing you need to worry about is codependent interfaces keeping each other open.
That's right. One other thing. You see that function there, the procedure XI interface. What that has is the parameter is not set as a const, and so therefore when it goes in, it will call increment and decrement the interface reference counts. If you were to put a const there, it doesn't do that because it's not going to change what it's pointing at.
Yeah. So if you do that, this will work
Hmm.
because we haven't incremented any reference counts.
Well, I think okay, yeah, const, okay.
Because it's constant, you're not supposed to change the pointer. So therefore it goes, okay, we're not going to change it. We won't add or decrement, we won't change the reference counts. We'll just use it as a pointer.
Because what reference count is how many variables are looking at me. And when you do a const, no extra variables are looking at you.
They're constants.
So Obj was saying that it's assigned here when it came back here. But then
because it's a const that you're passing in now, you're not incrementing reference counts, therefore you're not decrementing reference counts. And you free the object not when it has 0 reference counts, but when it drops down to 0.
right.
So
you can sit on 0.
You can sit on 0 quite safely, but if you go up 1 and then back down, you're dead.
That what we have right now is a memory leak because the t_obj is never the object is never freed. We're not freeing it.
Mm-hmm. True.
So when I was just going to say, when I first came to interfaces, and so this all makes sense, like you know, defining an interface, my interface equal to I've got my brain
Interface.
Interface, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Interface, open bracket.
Oh yeah, okay.
And whatever
sorry.
whatever you descend from, which could be interface. You don't actually have to put interface in, by the way. If you don't put anything in, it assumes interface.
Right.
It's a little bit of a hack that Delphi gave us.
Like with the T object and classes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to have a function, you know.
Oh, before you do that, put in a GUID. So the immediate line after interface, control is Control Shift G.
Shift G. Yeah, Control Shift G.
What's going on? Oh, yeah, Control Shift G.
Yeah. Now there's your GUID.
What I don't get is why everybody puts it underneath the interface thing when you're never actually going to look at the actual number, right? Like you're not going to care.
Tidiness. It's just tidiness. There's interface. There's the next line. Okay, moving on. It's just because otherwise that's way off to the distance. If you end up with a narrower screen, someone else is looking at it with a smaller screen or smaller window. They can't see that out there.
That's my point, though. Like I don't want to see it.
And by the way, interfaces can be without a GUID.
Yeah.
But if they are, if there's no GUID for a particular interface, you can't do anything like supports.
Yep.
Because supports relies on that GUID to know that it's one interface and not another. By the way, if you just copy and paste that interface and make another one, you've just copied that GUID. Now you've got two things competing for the same GUID, or they've got the same GUID. Only one of them actually is that interface, and the other one, it causes freaky behavior. So you never want to just blithely copy an interface.
I've never tried that. But do you know what happens?
Yeah, it works, but it does weird things because it'll always go back to one of the two interfaces, and the other one just won't be accessible.
Right. Okay. Cool.
It's like it's like the precedence of a declared type when you have two units that have the same type name, whichever one declares second wins.
Yeah, the name is really then only kind of an alias in the code for the GUI.
That's right.
Right.
Yep. And I've done some really in-depth playing around with interfaces, and in order to get to where I needed, I'm basically dealing with GUIDs and not interfaces. I just cast the GUID back into an interface when I need it, but I store it as a GUID.
Okay.
Might do it wrong here.
Yep, that makes sense.
By the way, the supports method, the second parameter is the interface. You can throw the GUID in there. It'll be very happy.
What was that, sorry?
What's the support method?
With the,
Scott?
yeah, okay, so the method is supports.
Oh, right.
And
Gotcha.
it's an overloaded method. There's a number of different ways it can be used. My favorite way is supports open bracket. You put in your class or your interface or what have you, comma, then you put in your interface that you're asking if it supports that. And then the third parameter is the is a variable of that interface that gets the assignment of an interface, of the interface object. And the whole thing returns a Boolean, which means that you can do if supports blah, 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 then, and you've already got a variable assigned waiting for you, which is your third parameter, so that you can use it on the very next line. It's very neat.
Yeah, sorry. I was just working towards saying that this bit about defining an interface, no problem. Like you say like here's like Scott has at least has described it in the past. Here's my contract that I want. Is there something to have at least carry this? I want access to my whatever my add function or something.
Yeah. By the way, just a piece of practical advice when you're working with interfaced objects all the time. If you need to adjust or if you need to extend your interface, the way to do it is you go to your interface first, you put in the additional extensions, and then you worry about what's left over. Don't go into the class, put the class in, because if you forget to put it in the interface, it's very, very happy. You're just not going to be able to access that method. But if you put it into the interface, then that contract says everywhere that every class that implements this interface now has to go ahead and put in the new extension that I've just added. So if I add a property or if I add a function or what have you, now the compiler is going to tell me, oh, all of your classes need to implement this now. So if you do need to extend an interface, always go to the interface and not any of the instances. That way you'll make sure there aren't any loose ends. Everything works the way you're expecting.
That is another thing from when I first looked at interfaces is that like if you had a sort of a moderately complicated class that is aimed at doing a few things, but has that implements that interface, then I mean I'm re-saying exactly the same thing you just said, but is that if I declare an interface reference of that interface type, then it's like a filtered view on that class. I can only see those things that are declared inside the interface.
Correct. All you're seeing is the interface at that point, and you're going back into the class for its implementation. But all you're seeing is the interface itself. Now, if you were to comment out in your TObj class, if you comment out the function line, you're going to get a compiler error that says you're missing the implementation of my inf. You see that little exclamation mark in the margin there?
Yeah, we just got this
explosion over here. If you hover your cursor over the word class, it'll tell you exactly what's missing. Isn't that nice?
If you press Shift Control Enter, will that complete it? I can't remember.
I'm unaware of it doing that. That would be really awesome if it did.
Can you just, while your cursor's in the class, just try that. Shift Control tap enter.
Yeah, I'm
See
trying
what
it
happens.
now. I'm getting
Shift
nothing.
Control Enter is nothing.
Nope. Okay, that's fine. I just couldn't remember. That's all. I just because I haven't played with Delphi for a while.
Yep.
Isn't
Sorry.
complete class something with a C in it? Maybe.
Yeah, Control Shift C completes
Oh,
a class.
C. Oh, sorry. Control Shift C maybe. Did that do it? No. That just
Yeah.
added the method that was
I
already.
think it did.
No, it did it.
That's because if you
That's
comment
cool.
out, hang on, wait. If you comment out line 20, comment that out, and then you comment out the red dot line.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's true.
Now
You want to get both of them?
now try it.
Control Shift C,
Where does it?
nothing.
No.
No,
Okay.
okay.
So no,
Oh,
no
well,
magic
it was
source.
worth a try. It was worth a try.
What if we
Yeah.
add it? Well, when 2 out of the 3 was there, it added in this one. What about? So it will add the third if you've got 2. It looks like.
Yeah, if you have ignoring interfaces, if you either have a method declaration in the class or you have the method implementation, then when you press Shift Control C, it'll add whichever one's missing. But it didn't work for just the interface, unfortunately. So I'll do that. Do you guys? Is it maybe going too far if I refer to the implements keyword or to do with interfaces?
I did cover that the other week in my talk, I think. It's worth
Okay,
going
cool.
over again because if we're going to treat this, we should treat it fully.
All right.
Maybe we could come back to it after Vincent's finished. Do you think? Implements and
Oh,
supports.
sure. Yep.
Do you think?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm open to any suggestions.
It's maybe
Sorry.
worth letting people digest this before going on to that. I don't know.
I was just going to say one thing that tripped me up, like this bit perfectly happy with, like declare an interface, right? And then declare a class to say that it supports the interface. That's fun, right? But then we come down to where this like splitting, like this what do you call it when someone has a used to be called multiple personality?
Schizophrenia? What?
Starts with S, yeah.
Schizophrenia? I don't know what.
Yes, a schizophrenic sort of nature that that I want to define an interface, because when I have an integer, like if I have an integer, like I don't have any problem, I have I of type integer, like there's no dual nature to that, or S of type string.
Okay, maybe
or
this will help. This will help, Paul. Declare it as T object. You can declare something as T object or T, as in the full word T object and T obj. They might be talking about the same thing, but one of them scopes you as a T object and the other one scopes you as a T obj.
T obj is a subclass of T object.
Yeah.
And then you've got,
So if you've got a variable of T object, you can assign T obj.create to T object to a T object.
Right.
But you won't be able to access any of its additional methods or properties. But if you assign it to T obj, then all of that's going to be there.
but what you should have there is interface should be my interface. Sorry, I'll go.
But even then, like the T object example, that's sort of an inheritance. The mechanism that's operating there is the inheritance thing, whereas this is like 2 separate branches, right?
It's the same thing. Put
It's
line 20.
It's behaving the same way. What you get is based on the variable type, not the constructor.
On line 22, make that interface of type my int. That's then they're equivalent to each other.
Where are we, sorry?
922.
Yeah, where are we going?
Instead
this-
of
this one.
iInterface,
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I didn't change that one. Yep. Why am I not erasing? When I started to get a little bit of a handle on this, what I wanted to type was interface equal tobject dot to create as my int for, right? Oop, whoa. My Jesus. And
Yep,
that
yeah,
spoke to me as being descriptive, but later on I found out that that maybe messes with reference counting or something. It adds an extra count on or something.
I don't know. I've never tried that.
Well, I guess we could actually just find out right now.
Isn't this a form of polymorphism? So
Not
So the
prevent
sensible
something.
thing to do would be to start with a variable that's declared of the interface type. So and then you can assign objects that are implementations of the interface.
Hmm.
So effectively, whatever's in that interface, that's the single method, it manifests itself in different ways depending upon the class that you're using to implement the interface. So
Yes.
so the class method, but it's got the same name.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I'm saying that's exactly right.
Yeah.
It is polymorphism, but it's not polymorphism from inheritance.
No,
It's
exactly. Yeah.
polymorphism from interface.
Yeah.
But it works precisely the same way.
Yeah. So it's actually higher, more abstract form. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, the
Hey,
one other
hey,
benefit
Scott,
to interfaces is that you can have a single class can implement multiple interfaces.
Yeah.
Now, Delphi can't inherit from two parents or two parent classes,
Yeah.
but it can have multiple interfaces.
Yeah.
And that's completely legal. So, well, unlike C++, where you can sort of have two different parents merged together and create some Franken monster, for Delphi, you'll inherit from some base class, but every interface that you sign up for, you need to implement. And there's some special rules if it shares the same method name or what have you. There's some special syntax so that you can actually have, say, two different methods implement each one in turn, even though they've got the same name from the interface's perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
John
So
had a question.
in my mind, it's a little more elegant.
John's got a question.
Yeah. I've read in a few places that interfaces have got something that's better than multiple inheritance itself has got. So if you're using multiple inheritance, there's something there within it that's not as good as what's in interfaces. Do you guys know about that?
Yeah. Scott was just saying that in C++
C++,
you can make like this, what they say, diamond inheritance, where you inherit two different ways from one thing.
Yeah.
But then come back to the middle and it's bad. Like as I understand it anyway, it's not good.
Yeah.
You can't do that in Delphi.
So you were talking about the whole schizophrenic nature. Does that make sense, Paul? Because there's a way one can describe that now that you've got the myAdd function there.
Well, I've learned enough to know that you're not supposed to, mess around with, not mix your objects and your interfaces, right?
Well, there is that, but
maybe
the lifetime. But if you were to write there instead of x or like next to x interface there, if you were to write obj.myAdd function,
right here,
yeah, an int myAdd function.
My
add capital A.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and you do int myAdd function.
Right, gotcha.
You put them on different rows, and we can refer to them.
Sure.
By row number. Okay, so my add function, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go on line 35. What that does is it goes to TObj, the class. It goes to line 13. It's calling line 13. That function there. See. And then it goes down to the implementation and does exit 1, and that's all fine and well. But the interface my add function is actually calling line effectively using the virtual method table for the interface using line 9, which in turn is line 9. That's right, which in turn refers to line 14, which calls the exit function. So if there's an extra step involved, it's bloody quick, so you don't worry about that in terms of efficiency. But that's when it comes to like on line 21, yours T interface, I interface versus my interface on line 21. When you declare, it's line 28,
Oh, yeah.
1 and 22, where you declare the variables. Yes, those two, when you declare the variables. That's why it's the same. Maybe I complicated it now. Okay, but
No,
I thought I was making it simple.
No, I mean, all of
complete.
this, I don't know about anybody else, but all of this is helping me, or
Yeah,
like I'm trying to accurately sort of like summon up the thoughts I've had in the past in trying to come at this stuff. And because like both of these are valid in a sense, or possible, let's say, and kind of mean the same thing without, all right.
well, yeah, with different implications. That's right. So
Yep.
the my int will give you access only to the methods that are in the my int, and then the TObj will give you access to all the methods and properties in TObj, regardless of whether they're interface
So I
related.
think it was when I had to say this interface is equal to the object create, I was like, but
Yeah, that helped you there. Yes.
This like just helped me say but I mean,
That
I
makes
feel like I
sense.
read that this was not, I mean, obviously you don't read this all over the place, so proper developers are not doing this, I don't think. So
That's
there's
implicit. That's right. Yes.
like either they don't need it or there's a actual problem with doing it. And I feel like maybe I've read that somewhere that like it disturbs the force a little bit or something. But
It's
this
just not necessary. If you happen to have TObject dot create as some other interface that's not compatible with inf, then you're gonna get a compiler error. But so we just remove that part and just say, yeah, here's a TObject which is signed to the inf. It works. It's just implicit conversion. That's all.
Yeah.
Type conversion.
is that one? Is that what it's called? T-non whatever the name's supposed to be. Anyway,
Oh, you mean one of the alternates to T interface object?
Yeah. Oh no, okay, that's not an interface. You're right. Okay. I was digging on the wrong tree whilst I mix my metaphors.
Someone was saying before when we were eating dinner, talking about having interfaces on forms and that sort of thing.
That was Vincent.
Vincent, okay. I consider that very good form for data modules. I don't like referring to tables and queries on data modules directly. I prefer having all that hidden behind an interface. But that said, T component in both FireMonkey and VCL, what they'll do is that they will manage lifetimes on within the component tree. So those their implementations of iInterface don't include a reference count. They are freed up when the parent is freed up, or it goes and frees up all its children.
Yeah.
Hence, you can put interfaces on anything that's a T component, regardless of whether it's a form or a data module or a control or a T data set or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
But they will not be reference counted. Their lifetimes will continue to be what they are even without interfaces. Just be aware of that.
Yeah, something you need to bear in mind is that the iInterface is not magically adding reference counting. Your reference counting ability comes from your class's descending ancestor class. So T interfaced object is where you're getting your reference counting from. And
I have made yeah. Sorry.
now,
go
if you hold down the control key and click on T interfaced object, it'll take you into the class where it's implemented, and you'll see alternates there. So you've got T interfaced object, but then if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see that there are some other class types.
Just scroll down.
Just scroll down a little bit.
Okay.
Forget that.
Scroll.
Just scroll down a little bit. You'll notice that
T
you've got
objects at the top.
T aggregate object and T contained object are also
I see what you're saying.
implementations for an interface, but they behave much differently. So you could send from any one of these other types when you do an interface, but you've got to understand the behaviors, and that's why you've got this big block of text above it, which explains to you how these other descent or ancestor classes to something that's going to receive an interface would look.
In no ref count object. I was thinking.
Yeah, there we go. So that's the one that doesn't do any reference counting, but it still looks like the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
But that one there, you've got to deal with its freeing itself. So that will not free itself, that one. So you've got to, at the end of that, go back to the object itself and free it.
Sorry, the T contained class won't free itself.
The T no interface object.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
T no ref count.
Sorry, no ref count. Sorry. Yeah, T no ref count is another option that you can descend from when you do an interface. So where you see T interface object, you could replace it with T no ref count object.
Yes. Yes.
And that would be legitimate, but you won't get reference counting, which means that you'll either memory leak or you've got to go back to the object and free it before you leave.
Yeah. And
so you've got to be very careful when you use that one to make sure that you're dealing with what you think you are.
Yeah.
So in this situation here, this begin and end here would have to have basically have to free the instance that's created at the beginning there, the interface equals it to go have
this
that
one.
Yeah, you see the object one there. Yes, you'd have to go and free that, and then the interface one, you'd have to have an object reference so you can free that or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to manage its life.
What is the weak interface?
Okay. So when you put weak in front of a variable reference, what that does is reference counting ignores the increment. So say you've got two interfaced objects and they reference each other. Since they reference each other, they will keep each other alive to the end of time or until you shut off your computer. The way to get rid of them, of this codependence, is that one of them should reference the other one with the weak attribute, and when it does that, assigning the variable to it does not increment the reference count.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Didn't know
Scott,
we could do this.
sorry, Scott, you show T contained object and T aggregated object. You're saying that you can use those to create interfaces as well?
Yes, you can have
Yeah.
an object that descends
Yeah.
from T aggregated
Yeah.
or T contained, and it will have slightly different behaviors depending on what you're trying to do.
Yeah. T container object, that's related to composition because Borland used to call composition containerization or something like that. Is that true? So the T container is the tighter version of aggregation, the composition one, where where there's ownership, which implies the parent clears up the children, whereas aggregate there's a separate responsibility because it's a loose. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So were we
yeah,
just
so
talking about contained object? Is that this one we were talking? Is that what we were talking about just?
T contained object.
Yeah, because on going back a long time on OOT diagrams, composition was called container, or was it contains or something like contains? It's not composed of. Whereas the industry was moving in the direction of the use of the term compose or composition. Has a so because that caught me out for a while.
So definitely read those blurbs. They're very important when you go to choose what type you want to descend from. And look, you can get away with just using T interface object and never touch all of these fancy ones. But if you know about them, then when you get to a situation which is obviously just screaming for that solution, then you'll do something that'll save you so much extra code. Because of the way that it's managed differently.
I remember the name of that. Well, I don't remember. I remember his book, Carrie Jensen. You can't see it because it's blurred, but Carrie Jensen was the guy who was very prominent in sending out the message about interfaces when they first came in. This was going back, I think, Delphi 5 or something like that.
Yeah, it was he that got me involved in interfaces.
Ah, right.
I read his book and I just went, yep, this is the way to go.
Yeah. He and his wife were a team because they used to, they're based in New York, I think, used to travel the world delivering the gospel.
I have a question. I worked out a few years ago how I could make a garbage collection system for Delphi. Not using interface, but you know how you have a circular dependency problem with interfaces and so on. I just want to make a garbage collection system for Delphi without requiring ARM or anything like that. And the trick is I need to know if something's a global variable, if it's on the stack or it's on the heap. So a global variable is on the heap, but I need to know whether it's basically, I can tell whether it's on the stack, but I can't tell whether it's just a variable in an object on the heap or it's a global variable on the heap. And I need to be able to distinguish between those two. If I can do that, I can make a very small type library that will basically have a complete and thorough garbage collection system. Does anyone know how I can do that?
I missed your question, but are you aware of Barry Kelly back in 2007 or something? 2008 so Barry Kelly was, compiler, engineer, smart guy, won't answer us on LinkedIn or Twitter currently, unfortunately, but he had he came up with a garbage like he has a blog post about it. Do you know about that at all?
No, but I just figured it'd be like after Delphi went for the whole garbage collection with ARM and then decided we'll backtrack on that. I thought, well, there are times it could actually be quite handy to have. And then so I figured I'd roll my own, so to speak. And the only thing is I need to be able to distinguish as to whether it's, as I say, whether a reference is on the heap in an object or on the heap as a global variable. That's all I need to know.
Would you keep some sort of dictionary of all the objects that are in play?
Yeah. Well, you kind of. You'd have a set of records, so reference records, and they would manage things. I can't remember exactly. I'd have to sort of find the pieces of paper somewhere, or I can put it together again. I remember, or maybe I've got the code somewhere. Maybe I've got the code somewhere. I don't know. Anyway, doesn't matter. But I just thought it'd be neat. So just seeing as we're talking here about circular references and things like that.
I think Barry Kelly was the guy that introduced anonymous methods and kind of functional program, not fully implemented. But he had to do a lot working with the heap and so on, the way in which he implemented. He left in 2009, moving to greener pastures, I think, because he wanted to pursue functional programming to a greater depth than it was possible at Ball and Stroke, Embarcadero, Code Gear, or whatever. Yeah, I can remember.
Here's a link about somebody talking about where do I get chat now? Used to see it here. Here's a link. But if you search for Delphi and garbage collection and maybe Barry,
just post into chat.
Well, I was looking for chat, but it's not coming up for me. It was coming up before. Oh, because this is on top of this. That's why.
I have a question, but I have a comment that I've always.
Okay. There we go. It's a bit slow. Yeah, that's Sue. Yep. Chat. Where are you, chat? Ah, there we go. It was there the whole time on a different screen.
Thank you.
That's more of somebody else's blog post talking about it, probably when he brought it up in the first place. He had code there, which I'm sure I've saved, but it's referencing like CC, Code Gear 21646, which I think we can still get from somewhere on Embarcadero, but I could just look for 21646. I'll get back to you later after today. Is Ian still here? Are you still listening, Ian? Well, I can't see the participants.
I'm still here if it's me you're referring to.
Oh, yes. You said you had something.
Now I've had to speak on interface reference counting with your objects that Scott was showing us or talking you through. You can just override the after construction and stop it dropping the ref count back to 0. Then your interfaced object will still have a ref count of 1 and won't free itself. But that just requires you in your constructor or in your object definition, should I say, including the override after construction method, and leave that method blank. Don't let it call inherited. Just leave that method blank, and you'll still have a ref count of 1.
Would that be in your implementing class, would it?
Yeah, in your class, you've declared a class of T something or other as a T interfaced object stroke my interface. So in that what you've got highlighted there, T object equals class T interfaced object. Add function, procedure after construction override.
What?
Like that?
No, override is a keyword.
Override is a command, isn't it? A
Oh,
semicolon.
right. Gotcha. Like that.
Do Control Shift C. And then comment out inherited. See, it says don't call inherited because that, just leave it blank. And that will stop it dropping the ref count back to 0. Because when it creates one, it gets a ref count of 1, and after construction drops that ref count back to 0.
I did not know that.
Could you say those same words again, please?
Sorry?
About the after construction part? Just the last couple of sentences that you said?
All I said was comment out the inherited method.
Yeah.
The inherited call.
And then you explained that the...
Yeah, well, what it does, the after construction method is implemented in T-interfaced object, and all it does is drop the ref count from 1 to 0. Because when the object was created, the ref count was set to 1, and then after construction drops it back to 0. So if you don't want it dropped back to 0, override after construction just with a blank method that will stop it dropping the ref count back to 0.
Because it doesn't call the inherited method, which would do that. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have to stop it calling inherited.
Yeah.
Thank you for your knowledge. The question that I was going to direct your way is, you said on the UK Slack that you had examples and stuff to talk about, and I'd like to hear them, and I wanted to check if you were like maybe running out of time or anything like that. Like, do you have a time when you have to leave us?
Not really, but I mean, I avoided interfaces for a very long time because I didn't really like the way they were implemented in Pascal. So I did spend a long time avoiding them, but sometimes they're very convenient. So in the session I offered to the UK group, I have used them there because I want to hide the implementation and just expose a few methods where the method should be unknown, and that is what interfaces are good for. As a general rule, I've tried to avoid them through my programming life.
How do you feel about air quotes modern Pascal in general? You know, anonymous functions, RTTI, attributes, type
I
inference.
tend to avoid some of that. I set out a couple of years ago to try and write code that worked in Delphi, that worked in FPC or Lazarus, and that also went through the Paz2JS compiler for web core or for web development. And when I started that about 5 years ago now, Paz2JS was very definitely the limiting factor because it was very limited what you could put through that. Now it handles almost everything. It's moved on an awful lot, but I've left my code, much of my code, in that very basic format. So I've avoided anything that's Delphi specific. I've tried to avoid if it hasn't yet been put into FPC or cannot be run through the Paz2JS transpiler. So I tend to avoid things like attributes and whatnot, and test everything will compile in WebCore and Paz2JS before I will use it. but that's just me being very picky.
No, that's
I'm on a
perfectly,
personal trend there.
no, that's a perfectly valid, like, set of constraints that you're working under, and you bring up a really great point about, how does any of this carry over to the FPC, which is kind of like, a dark mirror to Delphi. 'Cause I had for a kind of book club sort of thing that's going on, I created a what is it called, a binary counter reduction. It's a we're listening to these lectures by Alex Stepanov, the guy who created the standard template library for C++, and he's got this thing about this. He spends like, I don't know, 30 hours at like Amazon or something or other back in 2013 building up these, these lectures to the, small group of people to basically describe one algorithm. But FPC, come on, brain, back on track. Right. So I'd created because all these guys, like they know Go, and they'll use Python for things, and some of them are working for NVIDIA, for example, C++, and all this sort of stuff. And like, I've become more and more non-shy about saying, like, no, I love Object Pascal, and like, like a lot of things are in C++ that you guys have to like sweat bullets about just don't come up for us. It's like, it's not a problem. To distinguish between a character and a string, right? It's like in C++, there's this almost a brick wall divide between a character and a string, whereas we barely even think about it in most of our circumstances, for example. But anyway, I created a demo application that runs through this algorithm, and I was keen to rewrite it also in FPC because, there are FPC, you can run FPC online in different places. And I was running into some, not brick walls, but, I just started to realize some differences that I hadn't thought of before, like a T list or a generic. No, there's not generic, but
The object list is generic now.
well, I think I think it was the T list. T list in
T listed, yes.
Now I think I was mistaken, because I was looking at T list and reading it's just a list of pointers, and then if you want to put anything into it, you've got to cast your way to using them. And what's our ordinary T list? It would be the same.
Well, a T list in both Delphi and FPC is, as you say, it's a wrapper around an array of pointer.
Yeah.
Whereas the generic, both have a generic T list, which is T list something. You put the type, and what that does is wrap some type safe code around the type of object you put in, which you've defined in that T list something in your angle brackets. But both still have the core T list, which is just a wrapper around an array of pointer, and it's a very simple thing with about a dozen methods.
I think I wandered completely off on a tangent there, because the thing I didn't know was what library to include in Free Pascal to have like Delphi generics. That's what the problem was there.
Yeah, generics are different. Generics are also different again in Oxygene, which I looked at briefly, which is another flavor of Pascal. And interestingly, in Oxygene, in interfaces about 3 or 4 years ago, they added the ability to do default method implementations actually in the interface, so that then when you declared an object as being of type interface, you only had to implement in that object the methods you wanted specifically in that object, and you could leave the default method definitions for those you didn't want to specifically override.
Nice.
I think Rust works that way.
Which you can, that's where the implements keyword can come in handy. It's not quite the same. It wouldn't be as convenient as what you're describing from my understanding, but in principle you could do something similar. You could have a flyweight that implements your interface, and then in your main class where you just want to go, whatever that default is, I'll just have my property, and I say this implements, and you refer to that flyweight, and you say, okay, that flyweight will do the job for me.
Yeah.
But you can also do those. You can switch that out during runtime.
A long time ago, yeah.
So it's not quite the same thing, but you could sort of mirror that in a way, I guess, but not as clean as what you're describing from my understanding. Is that right?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
I think you're right. It's just convenient to be able to define a default method implementation for something you don't really want to override in every class that you're going to use the interface in. The other thing you could say is, of course, if you need a default implementation, then you shouldn't have defined the method in the interface in the first place.
Yeah, that's one thing that took me a little while to get used to. Interfaces must be as small and tight and specific as possible.
Yes.
And having interface hierarchies is not generally a good idea unless they're very shallow and in rare cases, but it's rare that I use them at all. But yeah, took me a while to get used to that.
Well, I'm still learning interfaces because, as I said earlier, I avoided them for a long time just because I did not like the implementation in Pascal, but that's just me.
No, I found them very handy. Like I say, when it comes to data modules, and for example, the other thing is using frames. Several times I've had a form is dynamic, so it might be defined in JSON, for example, or XML, so something like that. I want these fields, blah, 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 or in a database, and then, for example, one of the more recent ones I did was a database-driven database application. So when you made a form, and you base it on a table, well, you want to have the fields for the different columns. Like you want to have editors for different columns. But what if it's a date field? What if it's a text field? What if it's some numeric field? You'd want different kinds of editors for that. And in the end, I just have a register, and I could use the frames, and you can just talk to it using interfaces. I would pass in something I called what was it now? An I context, where you would refer to. Sorry.
No, keep going.
Oh, sorry. Where you'd have you'd refer to variables by name, and there would be of type T value, and so you could, but you can also get the type. So then you just you would pick which editor you needed for the particular value type that you were going to edit now, and all that would be worked out at runtime, and you just talk to it using an interface. It's just common interface. How it edits the value, you don't care. It just finds the correct one, puts it in the form, and off you go.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, I forget what I was saying that now. But anyway, I lost track. I'll shut up now.
Hey, I'm the king of losing track. Thank you. I'm here to lose track for all of us. I'm capable of driving us completely off a cliff.
I'm an apprentice then.
That's the only thing that I could teach you is less mental functioning. Shall we continue with Vincent? Is that what I'm happy for whatever people want. Yes, no? You guys can reply, you know.
I say yes. One yes.
Going once, going twice. All right.
Fabulous.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, Sue was just saying that she'd always found copy and paste in Final Builder to be very useful.
You know,
It's
I said,
actually
"Oh, I
quite-
wonder if I can copy and paste from this project to that project. And it just goes across, and it just
Yeah.
makes it so easy when you want to do things that are similar but not quite the same, or are the same, but you just want them in separate projects.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you say, for example, you copy an action in front of the builder, it's actually serializing that to XML in memory, and putting it onto the clipboard.
Yeah.
Pasting is a nightmare in front of builder, by the way, because if the action list or the target is a tree, and so working out how to actually inject that into the tree visually and also with the object model underneath as well, and keep them in sync. That's quite complicated and quite a lot of code for that. But the actual handling of the enabling and disabling the buttons and all that sort of stuff is just done through what I've just showed you tonight. It's quite simple. So
Have you got some demo code that you can share, because I can hardly read that.
Oh, really? Yeah, I'll put this up on GitHub.
Thanks. Yeah.
This particular application, I'll stick it in a repository and put it on GitHub.
It just looks like an extension to the way I've used interfaces, so it's something extra to learn.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, like I started using interfaces when they first came out, and initially I was like, oh great, I can create ActiveX objects. Excellent. But then you sort of delve into the underlying how they've actually implemented it, and you realize you can actually use interfaces for anything. The only annoying thing is to be careful of is, say I pass my iLogger interface around here. It's actually implemented on this frame. So where's my log frame? If this frame gets destroyed and I've still got an iLogger reference somewhere else, that will be a dangling reference, because it doesn't, your interface reference doesn't get nilled out automatically for you. So you need to be careful about managing how long you hang on to references to non-reference counted objects. So, for example, say I had, run that again. Come on. So I had an interface on this form here, and I was holding a reference to the interface in my main form. And then I closed that without first getting rid of my reference here. Nothing bad will happen until I try to use that interface reference again. So if I go, my I second form dot show something, you'll get an access violation. So you just have to be careful with that. Whereas when you're using proper reference counting with interfaces, the fact that you've got a reference will keep the object alive, and that's not the case with forms. So it mostly comes into bite you during shutdown. You need to clean up properly during shutdown.
I'm curious, could that be what the action was before?
Yeah.
You soon learn how to use it properly.
On your window, your cut and paste icons, or your copy icon was being enabled and disabled when you selected text.
Yep.
Is that polling the interface, or?
Yes. If I show you on the main form.
I don't know if you guys want to hear this bit, though. I mean, it's Delphi relevant. When Vincent has said he had this sort of context sensitive or sensitivity about copy cut, copy, and paste. There's this discussion about how it's polling to see if you've selected something and to be responsive. I guess a lot of the interface stuff is finished now. They may possibly come back to it a little bit, just a bit further on. Play or stop?
I think I might